What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my final thoughts ahead of today's Game Week 14 deadline. There's not much team news to go on that's come out before I've recorded this. There are a couple of things to mention. Then I'm going to get into captaincy, free hit, and answer a bunch of your questions as well. And I'll end quickly by talking about my own team. So let's get into it. So we'll start off with a small bit of information about African Cup of Nations, and that is that Wissa hasn't been selected in the squad for his country, so he'll be staying at Newcastle. I think for anyone looking at Voltemada, it's not a major issue in the short term. Like, Wissa will probably make his way into a Newcastle squad pretty soon, but given how long he's been out for and that he's not played a single minute this season, you've got to think over the next 2 to 3 game weeks, it's going to be minutes off the bench at the most, right? I don't see him starting any games. The only reason I bring it up is if you're looking at Voltemada as a longer term pick, Wissa will definitely impact his minutes eventually if he can get fully match fit and stay fit. We know he's got experience in the Premier League. He scored plenty of goals last season. He is going to get game time in that Newcastle team with the amount of fixtures they've got. But I don't think it's a major issue because of the 5 free transfers, which feels like the answer to everything. You get Voltemada in for Spurs at home, Burnley at home, Sunderland away, then you just reassess ahead of Game Week 17, when most of us will have 3 to 5 transfers to use. And I say 3 to 5 because some people will obviously use a bunch in Game Week 16, but most of us are going to have 3 to 5. And if Voltemada becomes an issue, you just sell him. You can even just sell him in 17 for Chelsea at home, Man United away, and then reassess ahead of Game Week 19. So Wissa obviously not played for Newcastle yet, but we know how good he can be. He will impact Voltemada eventually, but given that Game Week 14 is on Tuesday, Game Week 15 is this weekend against Burnley, I don't see any issues with a short-term Voltemada move. So we have had a small bit of team news kind of ahead of Tuesday's press conferences. This is how we get our news in 2025. Cunha posted a story on his Instagram account with a picture of him in training saying back, back, back with a party face emoji. So he's back in training. I know Fabrizio Romano has tweeted out to say that he's back and available. I have a feeling he's just guessing from this Instagram story, but the fact he's back in training probably means he'll be in the squad against West Ham. Will he start? I don't know. It's difficult to say because we don't know exactly what he was out for. Apparently it was a head injury. Was it concussion protocol they were following? If so, you'd think that he is available to start. But Amorim doesn't take too many risks. So it might be because he's missed the last couple of games and missed a bit of training, he gets him off the bench against West Ham, then he starts against Wolves. So I think this is a classic case of don't buy, don't sell. If you've got him, start him. Because why not? It's West Ham. If he plays, great. And if not, he'll come off the bench. And most people don't have a good enough bench to warrant putting or taking Cunha out of the 11. But I don't think you can buy him. It'd be a massive risk. I do think, or hope, he's a really good long-term pick. Like Man United in the next 8 game weeks have got to play West Ham, Wolves, Wolves again, Burnley and Leeds. And the other fixtures are 2 home games against Bournemouth and Newcastle and 1 away game against Villa. I do think Man United are better with him in the team. And I must admit, over the last couple of days, I've started to get a bit more confident about a start. Because even though Xerxes and Mount both scored, I think we're better with Cunha in the team. So I think there is a chance he'll start against West Ham, but no, I'm nowhere near confident enough. I'm nowhere near confident enough to tell you to buy him. And so if you're looking for like a Sarr replacement, you've got a bit of money to spend. I'd much rather go to like Mbermo, maybe a Foden. But I will say this, if Cunha gets good minutes, which I think he probably will, especially when Mbermo goes away for AFCON, I think long-term pick, he is just decent. We'll see though. His underlying numbers have not been great so far this season, but we know he's better than what we've seen so far in terms of goals and assists. So hopefully he can get back to some of that form he showed form he showed at Wolves last season. Anyway, most of you probably don't own him. I'm quite happy about this news. I hope he starts. I'm still unsure about whether he will. So let's talk about captaincy for Game Week 14. And I'm going to start off by saying straight away, I'm really not sure what the correct answer is this week. So I'm just going to talk through my thoughts as I see it right now. If I had Salah in my squad still, and I absolutely would not buy him right now, but if you still had him in your squad, you could probably make an argument that he's the best captain this week. And I know all about how bad he's been so far this season, but look at Gakpo last week. You get a good fixture, the returns have potential to come. And that's the same with Salah. Sunderland at home is still a good fixture for Liverpool. and he should start. But I have to say at this point, should. I can't be as certain about it anymore because he literally just got benched. And also, Liverpool won that game fairly comfortably. So it might be that Slot just keeps it the same. I just find that really hard to believe. And I know I said all these same things about Salah last week, but for him to be benched twice in a row, I just don't see it. So I think Salah will start. And when he does start, he often plays the full match. And Sunderland at home is not a bad fixture. Their defensive numbers are starting to slip a little bit. They're not as bad as a Wolves or a Burnley, but I still think it's an okay fixture. So if you've got him in your team and you are willing to take a risk, then I quite like Salah captain this week. But it is a massive risk. And I did not think I'd be saying that about Sunderland at home at the start of the season for Salah. So if you want to risk it, go for it. Most of us don't have him in our squads. I want to captain personally Bruno Fernandes against West Ham at home. And I do think he's a better pick than Mbeumo. Mbeumo's not a bad captain this week, by the way. But I think to captain a non-penalty taker, they've got to be miles better than the other options. And I just don't think Mbeumo is. I just think Fernandes has got more routes to points. And West Ham at home is such a good fixture. So I prefer him to Mbeumo. And I do think he's a good captain. But there's part of me that just thinks I can't do it to myself, basically. Like in terms of goal threat, Fernandes is the lowest out of him, Haaland and Saka. And so then you're relying on him getting into some of those positions a bit more often or picking up an assist and doing really well on the bonus and maybe getting defensive contributions. He's fully capable of getting double-digit hauls. We've seen it plenty of times before. But there's something telling me just don't risk it this week. So if you want to go Fernandes, great option. But I'm not sure I can sit here and say he's definitively the best option. And sometimes when you've got that thought process, you just default to Haaland because it's always so easy. Like I said weeks ago, I wanted to take Haaland on with captaincy in 12, 14 and 16. But over the last couple of weeks, game week 14 has been the one I've been wary about because it's Fulham away. I think going against him for Newcastle away, fine, and probably Palace away as well. Although Palace might be starting to suffer a little bit with the amount of games, but we'll discuss that closer to the time. Fulham away, I'm just not as confident to dodge it with Haaland captain. So I think just by default, Haaland is a good pick, like he will be every single week. You don't need me to tell you that. If you want to go against him, my next favourite is Fernandes. With Saka, it's a minutes problem for me. Like Haaland, he's not going to get rested, in my opinion, against Fulham. Could it happen? Of course, just like Salah got benched last week, but I don't think it will. And I think his minutes are pretty good every time he starts. Fernandes never gets rested in terms of minutes. Saka, I'm pretty confident will start. I don't really have too many doubts about that, but this could be the kind of game midweek fixture where he gets subbed early. But if he doesn't, it's Brentford at home. And that's a decent fixture. And his underlying numbers, Saka, are better than Fernandes this season, as you'd expect, because he's playing in a more advanced role. And obviously he's on penalties as well. So it's almost like some weeks you just have, like some game weeks, they're just so open you can go anywhere. I'm not convinced this is, I don't know, this is kind of open because there's so many good options. I really don't know. Saka, I just think is a risk. If you want to do it, fair enough. I've got the armband on Haaland. I switched to Fernandes during the weekend. I've since gone back to Haaland. I've got a feeling it's going to stick. It's just Saka's minutes and something about Fernandes. Like with Fernandes, for me and my team, I just feel like having him is enough of a differential already. I don't know if I need to go there with captaincy. I just don't know if I can take it. It probably doesn't happen. Like I'm only human, right? It probably doesn't help either that Fernandes is the last game. In some ways, that's nice if Haaland's blanked. If he hasn't, it's horrible. And that should not come into our thinking whatsoever, by the way, when we're making decisions. But it does, right? We're all human at the end of the day. That's a rant that probably hasn't helped. I just, is there enough to go against Haaland this week? Maybe, because Fernandes and Saka's fixtures are better. Like Fulham, by the way, they have conceded only 17 goals compared to West Ham 27 and Brentford 20. And their expected goals conceded 1.24 is miles better than West Ham. And I checked the other day, West Ham's defensive numbers have not gotten any better under Nuno than what they were before. Like they might be a little bit more organised, but defensively they're still awful. Like there will be goals in this game for Man United. I'm going to say that Haaland is the best option right now. And if I was going to go against him, I'd go Fernandes over Saka purely on a minutes play. So some of you might be considering free hit for game week 14. I've put a draft together, and I will say right now, you will hate it. You don't need to tell me you hate it. I already know you do. It's a 4-5-1, and the forward I've got up front is Jørgen Strand Larsen against Forest at home. And that's purely because there wasn't much money left over. And I felt like with a midweek game week, I had to have at least one player on the bench that was going to play. So I've gone for Gyokeres at Bournemouth because Senesi is suspended, so he'll definitely play. And Everton at home is not a bad fixture. Strand Larsen is by no means a great option moving forward. I would not be bringing him into my team, but for 1 week only against Forest at home, you never know, right? And sometimes on free hit, it's okay to take a bit of a punt. And I actually feel like Wolves are maybe due a result soon. I think they've possibly been a little bit unlucky not to get something more than what they have. They're still one of the worst teams in the league, and they're definitely worth targeting. But could Strand Larsen score 1 goal against Forest at home? It's possible. I think basically I struggled to downgrade any of the other players. But I think when it came down to it, if I was actually free hitting this week, I probably would just downgrade someone in that midfield and upgrade Strand Larsen to Voltemade or Mateta. Basically, that's where I would like to go. I did try and fit in Mateta and Voltemade, but it's just too many sacrifices elsewhere. So just to go through the team, I've got Petrovic in goal. Longer term pick, I prefer Verbruggen, but I think Petrovic, despite Bournemouth's defensive displays recently, is better against Everton than Verbruggen is against Villa. So that's why I've gone for him. It's a double up on Arsenal defence, Brentford at home. Timber, who I think will start, and Nkapie, who should start as well. Even if Saliba's back, I would expect him to come in from Mosquera. And it's always worth backing the Arsenal defence. I don't see any reason to not do that this week. I mean, you could arguably go for a double up on the attack, but I think there's lots of good attackers from other teams to target this week as well. Van Dijk against Sunderland at home, just a good pick this week. And then Munoz against Burnley away. The nice thing about being on free hit is if Munoz gets his yellow card and is suspended for 15, it doesn't matter for you. So unless you own him anyway. So Munoz against Burnley, he has to be in. If anything, it's weird that I've only got one Palace player, but you know he's going to play, and the attacking potential is just ridiculous. It's a really good fixture. In midfield, I've gone for the Salah and Gakpo double up. I think Gakpo will start again, but there is obviously some risk there. I was a bit more confident in 13 because Ekitike and Wirtz were slight doubts. They've obviously been in the squad. Wirtz started, so the doubts are not there this week. But I still think Gakpo will be in the 11. His minutes might not be quite so secure. So actually, if I was going to downgrade any play, it would probably be him. Maybe even to someone like Szoboszlai. Gakpo to Szoboszlai to keep the double Liverpool attack, and then do Strand Larsen to Voltemade or Mateta. With Salah, hold my hands up. I got it so wrong last week. But like I said earlier with captaincy, I find it really difficult to believe that he'll be benched again. So I think he'll start. And if you're willing to risk it, you could captain him as well. Obviously, if you wanted to make another downgrade somewhere else, you just swap Salah to Haaland and just keep Haaland in the team and go 4-4-2. Like if you did Salah right down to a really cheap midfielder and drop Gakpo even to like an Elliot Anderson, you've suddenly got 2 odd million to spend and you've got Haaland in the team. You could then have Haaland and Voltemade up front or Haaland and Mateta. The other 3 picks I'm much more confident in. Bruno Fernandes in Burmo, the best double up this week on attack. Cunha might start, but there is no way you can go for him on a free hit. And then Saka against Brentford at home. Really like that pick as well. So it's definitely not an obvious free hit team. And going without Haaland, like I've literally just said, I think Haaland might be the best captain this week. So going without him is super risky. But all it's going to take is for you to downgrade Salah. Salah and Gakpo out, like I said, to a cheap midfielder plus like a Dewsbury Hall and Anderson, and just bench Dewsbury Hall and stick Haaland up front. The rest of it I'm really happy with. Cheap goalkeeper, double Arsenal defence, Van Dijk, Munoz, Fernandes, and Burmo, Saka all look really good. It's just those 3 positions, Strand Larsen, Gakpo, Salah. But I thought I'd give you something slightly different to look at, and then you know where to make changes as well. Whether you should free hit this week, that's difficult to say. It really depends on your team. The only thing I can suggest is what I've suggested for weeks now. Get on a planner, like the My Team tool on Fantasy Football Hub, links in the description below, or scan that QR code on screen, and go through the next few weeks, plan your transfers, and figure out which week your team looks the worst. And that's probably the one to free hit. If you're sat here this week with 1 week issues, like Senesi's going to be suspended now, but he'll be back in 15, and you're kind of happy to hold him long term, that's the kind of thing that could push you into a free hit. But if you've got Senesi and Sar's not a good option long term because he's out, let's say Glasner says tomorrow he's not going to be back before AFCON, then getting him back in 15 is no better, really, because you're going to still have to sell him. So the free hit team for 14 is really nice, but I suspect a lot of people watching this will already have a pretty good team for 14, in which case game week 15, 16, 17, etc. might be better for you to free hit. So let's get into some of your questions. What do you think Gyokeres' minutes will be like moving forward? Short answer is not good enough to warrant buying him, in my opinion. He's just back from injury. He was in the squad against Chelsea. He came off the bench. There is a good chance he will start in game week 14, but it's far from guaranteed. And even if he does, I don't think he's going to play 90 minutes. And then you've got another game at the weekend coming really quickly after that. Like, the chance of him starting both games, I'm not sure is very likely. So longer term, he might go back to playing close to 90 minutes every game. But in the short term, that's too difficult to say. And also, before he got injured, he was basically starting all the time for really good minutes, and Marino couldn't get a look in. But since he got injured, Marino's played a lot and done pretty well. So I don't know if it's a guarantee that he just goes back to permanently sitting on the bench, especially with so many games coming up, plus Champions League and stuff like that. So at 8.8 million, he could be a good option, but in the short term, I'd probably ignore him. And obviously, we know that Saka is first choice penalty taker now as well. So you've got an 8.8 million forward without penalties that might not even start one of the next two. I think he will get one start. I think it's the two that are too difficult to tell. So I would probably come back to it in game week 16. Just not one to go for right now. So what are your thoughts on Arsenal defensive rotation this week? I don't personally think there's going to be as much as everyone is talking about. I actually think the back four will be Timber, Mosquera, Saliba if he's fit, but Mosquera otherwise, Nketiah left centre-back and Calafiori left-back. I don't think Ben White will start, and I don't necessarily think that Lewis Skelly will start either. And the big reason for the left-back stuff is Calafiori was subbed at half-time against Chelsea, and as far as we know, that was just tactical. He was on a yellow card up against Esteval. Arteta took him off for Lewis Skelly to avoid probably having a player sent off. So actually, Calafiori, it's not great if you owned him last week, but he has just had a bit of a rest. So I think he will come in against Brentford. I think, and again, maybe I'm being overly positive about the minutes, but I think it's just much more likely they get subbed. So Calafiori getting subbed at like 60, 65, 70 minutes, that could happen. Same with Timber. But I think they'll both start. And I think, again, maybe this is just a narrative we're all trying to write to make ourselves feel better. But without Saliba, you've got two centre-backs that don't usually start for Arsenal. Is he then going to want to change the full-backs as well? Like Ben White, Mosquera, Nketiah, Lewis Skelly. That's quite a change from the usual back four. I just don't see it. So I think they will play. I think if you want to buy Timber, that's fine. And ultimately, if you've got them, like Timber, Calafiori, etc., they're too good to bench. Because if they do start, there could be good points there. And you can't be sure enough that they won't to bench them. So ultimately, I just think, don't worry about it. They'll probably start, and that's probably enough just to have them in your 11 this week and hope that if they don't, you've got a decent bench. But even if they don't play, they'll probably come on anyway. So would you pick Cole Palmer on a wild card? Simple answer, no. Because a bit like with Gyokeres, you cannot be certain about his minutes over the next couple of game weeks. And for 10.3 million, you want to be certain that he's going to start. And I just don't think you'll have that certainty. Like Maresca did say before the Arsenal game that Palmer was fit and available to start. And maybe that's true. But I find it unlikely that he's just going to come back from being off for quite a while to just start straight away. It seems much more likely that he'll get minutes off the bench. And he didn't play any part at all in that game against Arsenal. Now, that probably was game state related. They were down to 10 men. You don't want to throw someone in who's been injured for a while. But I still don't believe he'll start against Leeds. Now, Maresca might tell you in the press conference on Tuesday, but unless he specifically states that he will start, I think you've got to assume he'll be on the bench. And even if he gets minutes off the bench against Leeds, it's not a guaranteed start against Bournemouth. I think Maresca is very careful with injuries. And with the way that Palmer's been out, you don't want to risk him being out another bunch of time. So I think given the quick turnaround between games, the fact they're both away, you're probably looking at game week 16 at the earliest. So what I would say is if you're on wildcard, and I'll be honest, with the quick turnaround, I've not looked into wildcard drafts all that much. But if you wanted to be able to get to Palmer quickly, Saka's probably the easiest way to do it because he's not that much cheaper and they're very similar price. So you could always jump from Saka to Palmer. Now, if you go for Saka, you're not going to want to sell him in game week 16 because he's got Wolves at home, but you've got that spot to do it later on. Also worth saying, buy free transfers in game week 16. If you need to get to Palmer by freeing up money somewhere else, you're going to have the moves to do it. So I personally hope that Palmer comes back and does really well because I think we need something to mix up FPL. So we're getting a little bit stale right now with the options, especially when lots of players are going to African Cup of Nations. But I always talk about like minutes are such a key thing with FPL picks. You need to be sure they're going to play enough, especially when they cost over 10 million. I just wouldn't have that confidence with Palmer right now. So we've got another Chelsea player question here. Is Enzo Fernandez a keep or sell? Now, you're not going to like the answer because it's not going to sound very helpful, but I genuinely believe this is the case. He's both. It's absolutely viable to keep him. It's absolutely viable to sell him. Why would you want to keep him? You've got a nailed-on player who only costs 6.7 million, putting up 0.39 non-penalty expected goals per 90 and 0.15 expected assists. They're really good underlying numbers. Can he keep that up for the whole season? We'll have to wait and see. I'm not convinced the goal threat will stay that high, but it's not going to come down in a massive way where he's suddenly a bad option. And he's also averaged 88 minutes per start. And it's Leeds away, Bournemouth away, Everton at home next 3, which is not terrible. So if you're sat there with Enzo and a bunch of other problems like Senesi, Sarr, etc., of course it is more than viable to keep Enzo Fernandez. Why might you want to consider selling him? Well, Palmer's back now, so eventually you would assume he's going to start regularly and he's going to take penalties off Enzo. So Enzo will become a slightly worse option because he doesn't have penalties. And it might be that Palmer takes up a lot of the attacking play as well, which means maybe Enzo gets a few less returns. And although Leeds away, Bournemouth away, Everton at home's not bad, it's not amazing either. It's not like playing West Ham, Burnley, Sunderland, etc. Although, again, I know a lot of people think Sunderland are... We're not going to get into that right now, but you know what I mean, right? The fixture run is okay, but not amazing. Because after Leeds away, Bournemouth away, Everton at home, they got to play Newcastle away as well. So you could, if you've got plenty of transfers to spare, and let's say you've got money in the bank, and you're considering doing Enzo to Mbeumo for West Ham at home, Wolves away, Bournemouth at home, then you're going to sell him again. Well, I'd much rather have Mbeumo than Enzo next 3. But like I said, if you're sat there with lots of issues, it's not like Enzo Fernandez is a massive problem. And I've just said that Cole Palmer probably won't start both of the next 2, maybe not either of them. Therefore, there's going to be a lot of time when Enzo's got penalties, when he's on the pitch. Now, could Enzo get rested against Leeds away? Maybe. I think we will see some rotation from Chelsea. I think if Maresca's going to rotate, this is the game to do it. But I think Caicedo's red card helps Enzo's minutes. I just don't see Caicedo missing out and Enzo as well, unless Enzo's not fit. And given that his minutes are just always good, I think he probably will play. So that's what I mean by both options are viable, keep or sell. I will say, between 6 to 7 million, I'm not sure there's any players that are miles better than Enzo. Like, Szoboszlai's on 4 yellows. Minte is good. And I like the fact he's got Villa at home, West Ham at home next to, both at home, both good fixtures. But he's not miles better than Enzo. So if you're not sure about selling him, or you might have another issue to deal with next week, I prefer keeping him. But if you've got the money to upgrade, I'd much rather have Mbeumo, someone like that, next 3. So it's really going to depend on your team. That's not me sitting on the fence. I just think that is the case with Enzo right now. So I don't think I got a specific question about Bruno Guimarães for this video, but I did get a lot of comments on yesterday's video, basically saying that I didn't talk about him enough as a Sarr replacement. So let's talk about him right now. Short answer, I don't think he's a bad pick. He's only 6.6 million. He starts every game. He almost always plays 90 minutes. He's got some attacking threat. He's got some defensive contribution threat as well. And the next 3 fixtures are Spurs at home, Burnley at home, Sunderland away. So I can't sit here and tell you he's a bad pick. And if you want to go for him, you absolutely should. And his scores recently have been really good. So his points for the last kind of 6, 7, 8 game weeks, 4, 10, 4, 4, 10, 2, 14. So if we're going to count defensive contributions as a return, which is what he got against Brentford in game week 11, he's only blanked once since game week 7. That was against Brighton away. So he's done really well. Would I see let's say I personally needed a midfielder 7 million or below. Could I see myself buying him? I'm not so sure. I think this is one of those cases where he's not a bad pick. Like, he really isn't. But people are interested because of his recent scores. Right? If he hadn't scored that 10-pointer against Man City, would people be looking at his underlying numbers saying, oh, he's worth 6.6 million and the returns are coming? I'm not so sure. And the problem for me is his attacking threat is okay, but nothing more than that. So 0.17 expected goals per 90, 0.1 expected assists. So there is some genuine goal threat there. It's not that far off like a Bruno Fernandes, for example. But if you compare that on the Opta Stats tool on Hub, and again, as always, links in the description below if you want to use all these tools for yourself. If we go to Elliot Anderson, he's got per 90 minutes 0.07 expected goals per 90, 0.12 expected assists. So that's a expected goal involvement 0.19. You compare that to Gyokeres 0.27. So Gyokeres is slightly better, but he's also 1.3 million more. And then, okay, you can say the attacking threat is a bit better, and he's got defensive contributions, but he's only averaging 9.17 per start. You need 12 as a midfielder to get the additional 2 points. And again, if you look at Anderson's numbers per start, he's getting so recovery is 8.46 and clearances, blocks, interceptions, and tackles is 5 per start. So that's 13.46. Like, on average per start, Anderson's basically hitting DEFCONs every game, and he's cheaper. So that's my real issue with Bruno. Bruno Guimarães, this is not Bruno Fernandes. Is he worth 1.3 million more? I'm not convinced he is. I think Anderson's just better value. You can put that money to better use elsewhere. But again, I can't say that Gyokeres is a bad pick. So if you wanted to bring him in, I think it's absolutely fine. Like, for me, my Paquetá replacement, I've only got 6.2 to spend, so it's easy to go to Minte. And he is more attacking than Bruno, but he doesn't have the DEFCON. So you could make an argument that Bruno Guimarães is a bit better. He's one of those players that I think as soon as the attacking returns dry up, people won't be as happy to have the defensive contributions returns only from him. So that's why he's not really on my radar, but I think it's okay to buy him if you want to. So if you could only sell one, Reinders or Senesi, do you address the weak spot in defence or the weak spot in midfield? Now, the reason I included this question, even though it's so specific, is because a lot of people ask me, should I sell this problem first or this one? Essentially, it depends, right? So if you're going to sell one this week and one the next week, then I would prioritise the more interesting move. And in my opinion, there's more interesting midfielders to buy this week than there are defenders. So if you're going to do one this week, one next week, sell Reinders first. If you've got money to upgrade, by the way, because he's only 5.3, I guess you could just go straight to Elliot Anderson and then deal with Senesi the week after. So that's how I would look at it. If you only really want to sell one and you're keeping the other one longer term, or potentially you might have to keep the other one long term, then you go for you sell the player that's more of a problem. And for me, that's the guy that you can't guarantee starts from, which is Reinders. Now, I know Senesi is coming back to not the greatest fixture run. It's Chelsea at home in 15, Man United away in 16. But you know he'll start. You know he's good for defensive contributions. You know he's got Burnley at home in 17. And if you get stuck with him and you have to play him that week, that's not a problem. And Reinders, of course, started against Leeds. Maybe this is a start of a run of him being in the 11 now, but it also probably isn't. So with these decisions, like I said, if you're going to sell one and then the other one the next week, prioritise the more interesting move. And most of the time, that's going to be a midfielder over a defender. But if you're thinking longer term, where you might get stuck with the other one, or you might have other issues to deal with next week, then obviously keep the one that's nailed. That also gets you good DEFCONs as well, even in more difficult fixtures. So would you take a -4 just to have someone to potentially come off your bench? All my subs are injured or suspended. So I think at the moment, my general opinion with hits is, it's quite hard to justify them when we're only 2 game weeks away from getting 5 free transfers. Like, those hits have got to be really needed in game week 14 or 15 to justify them. I think for most people, they're not justifiable. Now, if you've got an 11 where you think there's like a 80% plus chance that one of the players is going to get benched or not feature at all, then maybe you take a -4 to cover that, especially if that player is good for the long term. But if you're just taking a -4 to have cover this week and that player you're not really bothered about long term, I don't think you can justify that. Not with those 5 free transfers. And I think it's the same in the 11. Unless that player is very likely to return you points in the next 1 or 2 game weeks, I just don't think you can do it. So as always, you're going to have to weigh this up on a case-by-case basis. Like, there will be some questions on the deadline stream about hits where I just say, yeah, I'd probably do that. Like, if you've got Senesi on the bench and Gyu, and that's your only bench options, chances are you're getting 0 minutes. Like, Gyu could play against Leeds. Maybe he starts, but the chances are he probably doesn't. And Senesi's obviously suspended, so he's no good to you. And if you've got Sarr in the 11, you've already used a transfer, then yes, in that case, I would take a hit. But like, for example, if you've got Nick Pope, I don't think it's justifiable to use a hit to get rid of him when Dubravka's got a home game against Palace. You can always deal with Nick Pope from game week 16. So for the most part, I would probably just ignore them. So I'm just going to quickly talk about my team ahead of today's deadline. And when I say I'm going to talk about it quick, I really mean it this time. So in defence, I've got Raya and Timber double up for Arsenal. Raya will definitely start. I'm pretty confident Timber will as well. Good fixture against Brentford at home. Lequar against Burnley away. He should start. He's played every single minute for Palace so far this season. Good goal threat, good chance of a clean sheet, good for DEFCONs as well. And Van Dijk, you know I like him at this point. He's going nowhere. Sunderland at home on paper, decent fixture. Dewsbury Hall comes into the 11 because Senesi is suspended. And ultimately, I think for my team, it makes more sense to sell Senesi in 15 rather than this week. Paquetá is red flagged. I am going to sell him for Minte. I've looked at other alternatives like selling him to Elliot Anderson to free up some money, but I can't see right now what that money would be useful for. And by the way, there's no harm in selling a player to get money for later on, but I just think with 5 free transfers coming up soon, there is less need to have that money in the bank because I can always find another way to free it up. And ultimately, Minte for Villa at home, followed by West Ham at home, I just really like. Saka, Brentford at home going nowhere. Fernandes is just going to be in my team for a long time. And Cunha, as I mentioned earlier, is back in training. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to start, but he's going to feature against West Ham. And there is a chance he will start. And if he does, it's a great fixture. And the reason it's so easy for me to keep him is it's Wolves away in game week 15. And I'm pretty confident when Mbeumo and Ahmad go to AFCON, Cunha's minutes will just be really good. And maybe even before that as well, which is part of the reason that I brought him in. Like, he could absolutely get in ahead of Mount or Xerxes before Mbeumo goes to AFCON. So I really like him as a long-term pick. I think once Ahmad and Mbeumo go, Man United will be weaker. But I think we sometimes overplay how bad it will make a team. Like, it will make Man United worse, but they're still going to score the odd goal or two. And someone else has to take up the mantle for getting those goals. It could be Cunha. Hopefully it's Fernandes. Or Cunha. I don't care which one. Preferably both, right? Up front, Mateta. Could he get benched? Possibly. I think it's less likely now Sarr is injured. Although we'll find out from Glasner today whether that's definitely the case. But I think he will be. And ultimately, it's Burnley. Like, you've got to be so sure of a benching against Burnley to bench Mateta or to sell him. And I just don't have that confidence. And Haaland's obvious. Fulham away. If one of the players misses out, I've got Anderson on the bench. It's not ideal against Man City, but he'll probably get DEFCONs. So hopefully they can... Well, I say hopefully they can keep the score down. Right now I've got Haaland captain. I don't know if it's going to stick. I really want to captain Bruno, but something's putting me off. And do you know what's crossed my mind today? I did say this was going to be quick. I'll try and make this quick. Do you know what's crossed my mind today? Have I gone back to Haaland because of my rank now? Like, you shouldn't play any different, really, but it does play on your mind. Like, do I want to risk? I'm now top 20k, and I don't want to stay there. I want to push on for more, which is partly why I want to go Bruno. But unless I'm absolutely sure that Bruno's the right call, do I just play it safe and boring? Should this be playing on my mind? It shouldn't be, but it is. Like, I want to have a really good finish this season, and I was already wavering on Haaland, like not captaining him this week anyway. So in the back of my mind, I know I'm not sure about going against him. So Haaland is my captain, Bruno's my vice. That might change by the deadline. I cannot promise you where it's going to end up. Who knows? Arteta might say that Madueke's out and, you know, that means that Saka's probably going to play 90 minutes. I might captain him. I really want to go against Haaland this week and in 16, but I'm finding it difficult to do it this week. And if I get to Thursday and Haaland's blanked or not and I've captained him, I know I've got Bruno and Cunha still to come. These things shouldn't play on your mind, but they do. Anyway, I'm going to do Paquetá to Minte. I'm pretty confident most of my players will start outside of Cunha, but I'm willing to take the risk on him. And then in game week 15, I'm probably going to do Senesi to Vandenberg ready for game week 16, but something else might happen before then, so we'll talk about that for game week 15. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed that, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and I will catch you at 4 PM UK time today for the deadline stream. I'll catch you later on.